Hi everybody, this is Kevin and welcome back to another video. And today I would like to share my thoughts on the legendary visual novel Fate Stay Night, which was just remastered this past August to commemorate its 20th anniversary because it was originally released all the way back in 2004. And for the very first time, it has an official English translation, which is still crazy to think because, you look at what the Fate series has become 20 years later and how it spawned its own multimedia franchise from, the video games. You have visual novels, turn-based RPGs, action RPGs, one of the most popular gacha games of all time in Fate Grand Order. With anime adaptations, you have series, OVAs, feature-length movies, and then even some anime shorts, which are mainly from Fate Grand Order. Whenever they have a new story, they'll do a little anime short. I guess that you call that an OVA, right? But you have them, you have light novel adaptations, manga adaptations, all sorts of merchandise, t-shirts, figures, you name it. And now, 20 years later, the original visual novel is finally available for you to buy and read for yourself on the Nintendo Switch and PC through Steam. I've seen every Fate anime adaptation prior to reading the original visual novel, and I love them all, but this is the first time I read the original visual novel, and I have concluded that it is an absolute masterpiece. As of right now, my game of the year, I give it my highest recommendation to you, and so the whole point of this video is me selling it and making you want to read it because I loved it so much. I wish more people would experience it. When people say, how do I get into the Fate series? Start the original visual novel, because as someone who's watched every anime adaptation, knowing what goes on in the original visual novel helps you enjoy the other series even more. Like the new one coming out right now, Fate Strange Fate, which I think is an adaptation of a light novel. So that's already has its own source material. But, someone who's only seen the anime and now read the visual novel, there are so many things in Fate Strange Fate that occur in other adaptations, such as, Lord Elmoy II's case files, knowing who the hell Zelrich even is, all this stuff, Gilgamesh, knowing about him, and kind of knowing the relationship with him and Enkidu from the Absolute Demonic Front Babylonia anime, which is also an adaptation of the story arc in Fate Grand Order. So there's just so much going on, and it all helps to know about the original Fate Stay Night, and oh my god, just absolute kino. Which I've enjoyed all of the Fate Stay Night anime adaptations, even the 2006 Studio Dean version, which I know people have problems with, but that was actually my introduction to Fate. I still enjoy it. Unlimited Blade Works, from UFO Table, the Heaven's Feel movies, and Fate Zero even, which, after reading this now, there are so many things in the original visual novel that obviously inspires Fate Zero. So when people say, oh, start with Fate Zero because it's the prequel. No, don't start with Fate Zero because then you're going to be spoiled on everything. What are you doing? The author of Fate Stay Night is a man named Kineko Nasu, who is also the co-founder of Type Moon. He began in 1998 with a series of novels called The Garden of Sinners, which I think were eventually adapted by UFO Table into either an OVA series or feature-length films. But Nasu has also written Tsukihime, Witch on the Holy Night, Fate Stay Night, of course, as well as Fate Hollow Ataraxia, and much more. And I don't know if he necessarily writes all the other Fate stories for the other video games, but I know he provides outlines or at least a rough idea of where he wants them to go with Fate Samurai Remnant, Fate Extra, Fate Grand Order, and so on and so forth. And the illustrator for Fate Stay Night is a man named Takashi Takechi, who provided so many beautiful illustrations throughout the visual novel. It's really impressive how, as you go through the story, all the different expressions the characters make, the way they're able to show the battles by how quickly the images move or flash on the screen, their different attacks, their weapons. It's so well done, beautiful illustrations, and of course, Takechi has also provided illustrations for Tsukihime, for Fate Grand Order, and really all the other Type Moon works. So lots of great stuff there. Again, Fate Stay Night was originally released in 2004, And, you know, when you search it up, you'll learn that it is the adult visual novel and eroge. And yeah, that was true of its initial release. And it's funny because I think Nasu tries to get away from that topic, because in the interviews I've seen of it, he mentions how they only did that to try and sell it in the very beginning, because they're still more of a they still kind of are a niche company type Moon, but in the grand scheme of things, I think more people are aware of the Fate series because of all the anime adaptations and whatnot. But he claims that they did the hentai scenes in the visual novel as a way to sell it, and the 2004 release on the computer, I think, is the only one that has those scenes in it, and they've been revised in all the subsequent re-releases, with the 2012 Rialta Noah really changing things. That's the PlayStation Vita version, and also what the remastered version is based on, where they imply that the sex scenes are in the game. Like, the characters will straight up say, oh, it's the mana transfer and things like that. And, like, you read into it, you know they're having sex. But they did away with showing boobs and showing vagina and showing everything. Okay, they show it all in the original visual novel. And, you know, you might have some purists out there who say, oh, no, it's censored, whatever. I think it's better in the Rialta Noah having the censored, having it just implied, just the way that the story is meant to be. I think it's handled better that way. You can visualize it yourself just by having it implied. The way they explain it with mana transfer, I like that better. And, you know, it's just interesting to see how, like, at its origin, that's what Fate is. It's a hentai visual novel, but as it goes on, they try to move away from it, I guess for good reason, because it's like, you kind of want more mass appeal, but they still have to kind of, you know, because at the end of the day, with the different roots and the romances, you know, it's going to happen. These are all a bunch of teenagers who want to get with one another, or at least Shiro does, with his waifu of choosing. So I just thought it was interesting and definitely worth mentioning. It's funny though, when you go to like the Wikipedia page, it'll say the genre is visual novel and eroge, which the Rialta Noah and the remaster version, I don't think you can say it's an eroge. At its core, it's, you know, it's a romance. It's got the science fiction, dark fantasy, battles, the clash of ideals, all this other stuff. So I don't know. Maybe its initial release it was, but now, you know, it's just a straight up visual novel. But what do you guys think of the way it's changed? I looked, for research purposes, I did look up the original scenes, and it's kind of memeable, like the way it's written, like Tosaka's anus defenseless. Like you'll think that's a meme, and someone just wrote that poorly or mistranslated, but that's how, and it was fan translated, but that's how it was presented way back when. So I don't know. I do like the remastered version. It's more tasteful, and again, you can visualize it yourself and just take the implications with what you will. At the end of the day, though, I think Fate Stay Night is a bit of a hard sell to the average person, because it's not even a video game. Like, okay, sure, I read it on my Nintendo Switch, but there's hardly any gameplay involved. You know, you're reading a visual novel. Every so often, you'll be prompted with a choice where, depending on what you make, you'll either raise or lower your affinity with a certain character, you'll go down a branching path, or you'll even reach a dead end where your character will die. But the story is elevated by incredible voice acting. Every character is fully voiced. The only thing that isn't voiced is when, you know, the main character, Shiro Emiya, is just having his introspective thoughts, but otherwise the characters all speak. Incredible cast, which they actually got the original voice actors from Fate Stay Night from the 2006 Studio Dean adaptation, because when the visual novel originally released in 2004, there wasn't any voice acting. But I think the voice acting is incredible. The sound effects, oh my god, all the sound effects from, you know, the servants fighting, clashing blades, it just sounds so good, to, you know, when characters die and get hit, just, oh my god, it's really some bone-chilling sound effects, if you will. And then the music, the OST, incredible soundtrack. What I really like about the OST, too, is the fact that there's some songs that only play at, like, one scene and that's it. So it really hits, and it's very effective there. But the general story is that it's a Holy Grail war, the fifth Holy Grail war, following the main protagonist, Shiro Emiya, who is the adoptive son of Kiritsugu Emiya, who had participated in the previous Holy Grail War, the fourth Holy Grail War. And so Shiro is roped into the fifth Holy Grail War, and ends up summoning the servant Saber. Now, there's 7 masters and 7 servants, at least there should be, but, plot reasons happen later on, and each master has a servant of a different class, where I mentioned Shiro has Saber, there's Archer, there's Caster, Rider, Lancer, Berserker, and Assassin. They all end in ER except for Assassin, but they each duke it out, and it's really interesting to see like how some servants are more good, some are evil, some are more neutral. You see which ones are stacked against each other, which I think Fate Grand Order, maybe some of the other video games established it, but as someone who's played Fate Grand Order, you see the different classes and how they match up. Like Archer defeats Saber, Saber defeats Lancer, Lancer defeats Archer. There's sort of like a triangle system there. And then you have Berserker, who's effective against every class, but weak to every class as well. However, in this visual novel, Berserker overpowers everyone, so I guess that came later. So, cool little matchups there. There's 3 main story routes, and the way you reach them is you have to complete one, then the next one unlocks, and finally the third one, which in total, there's 5 endings, plus the true final ending, the last episode, and 40 bad endings. So based on your choices, you'll reach a bad ending. Some of it is pretty obvious how to avoid the bad ending, but, if you want to experience it all, you'll make a bad choice and get a bad ending, and some of the deaths, man, are pretty gruesome. I'm still wondering how this game got a T rating instead of rated M for mature, because Tsukihime got a rated M, but, this is rated T for teen somehow. So you get the bad endings. The routes really can act like their own story in and of themselves because of how long they are. This visual novel took me 100 hours to read, which I got all the endings, all the bad endings, the true ending, everything. And I looked at how long to beat. Some says like 60 hours, between 60 and 80 hours, but it all depends on how quickly or slowly you read. And also, with the voice acting, you'll probably read faster than the voice acting, so you might want to listen to all the voice acting before advancing to the next line, which I bounced around a little bit. Like, the more important scenes, I definitely listen to all the voice acting, but some of the scenes that it's like, okay, I'm reading it, I get it, let's just keep going, let's advance the story a little bit. In Fate Stay Night, there are 3 main story routes, which are each unlocked after completing the previous one, and the game follows sort of like a chapter system. It's broken up into days. There's 16 days, and the first 3 days start off more or less the same, but what happens is you complete one story route, and then you start the game from the beginning, and you see how the first 3 days sort of alter a little bit, and then you can go down the branching path and unlock the next route. But the routes are as follows. You have the Fate route, the Unlimited Blade Works route, and finally the Heaven's Feel route. And they all center around different characters. Like, all the characters are obviously the same, but different characters take center stage. So Shiro Emiya is always going to be the main protagonist, but say in the Fate route, Saber is also a major focus. Then in Unlimited Blade Works, you have Rin Tosaka and Archer, and finally with Heaven's Feel, you have Sakura Mato. They also have a lot of different themes which they tackle, which I think all of them tackle the romance aspect, Shiro falling in love with whichever girl, the 3 main heroines, as seen on all the promotional material, of course. So that carries over, but I feel like it's more impactful in the Fate route, especially, and also Shiro struggling to become the mage that his father was, Kiritsugu Emiya, and, trying to become the hero of justice both his father and himself strive for. So you have that. Then with Unlimited Blade Works, it's the struggle of ideals and how to prevent yourself from being corrupted in the future, or how to strive to be a better person with the knowledge of what you might become. It's kind of difficult to explain, but if you've already read this or seen Fate Stay Night, you'll get what I'm saying. Because I don't want to spoil all the major twists, but it's just some great stuff. And then finally with Heaven's Feel, again, taking all the knowledge you previously learned, with Heaven's Feel, you get a lot of the suspense and horror aspect to it, as well as a lot of lore of the entire universe of, Fuyuki, the Holy Grail War, and just everything that's gone down. Another thing we mentioned before, too, about the servants is how there's, 7 masters, 7 servants, but in each route, the servants have more of a focus. So, as an example, let's just use them, we'll say, okay, Saber and Lancer have more of a role in the Fate route, but then in Unlimited Blade Works, Assassin and Berserker have more of a role, and you get little things like that. So every servant is able to be fleshed out, and you learn more about them, and that's the whole fun of reading this or watching the anime for the very first time, is not knowing who these servants are and learning the truth about them, because that's why they call them Saber, to hide her identity of who she really is, what heroic spirit she really is. And I love that aspect about the whole Fate series, how they take historical figures or folktale legends and incorporate them into the story and make it line up with how it happened in the real world, or line up with their own folktale story. And that's also expanded more in Fate Grand Order when you go into the interludes and stuff like that. Another character I wanted to mention is Iliasville von Einsburn, who is also a major character who appears in all 3 routes. I guess she has more importance in each route. But again, as you go through the story and you play through it, you take the knowledge you know from the Fate route, apply it to Unlimited Blade Works, and then apply it again to Heavensfield, and you learn more about these characters. And I feel like Ilia is definitely an important character. And to a certain extent, you could say that with Heavensfield, while it's the Sakura route, it's also the Ilia route. Another character I want to talk about is Kirei Kotomine, who is my favorite character in the entire Fate series. He just steals the show every scene he's in. His presence takes over, the voice acting, learning more about the character. Again, as I keep mentioning with the different routes, how you apply what happens in Fate to Unlimited Blade Works, and then finally Heavensfield. You learn so much about Kirei Kotomine, and then even, I know it's going to a different form of media, but Fate Zero, learning even more about Kirei's backstory and what influenced him. And I love it. He's such a great character. Minor spoilers about Kirei Kotomine, but he is a major antagonist. And he's an antagonist that's handled so well that you can almost understand his perspective, which is why I think he's my favorite character in the entire series. But it's just such a great character, so well written. And I guess I had to mention him as well. It's just an incredible experience. I loved it so much. I strongly recommend this to you to go read it, or even if you don't want to read it, I guess watch the anime. If you want my opinion on how you should watch the anime, I would say to watch the 2006 Studio Dean version of Fate Stay Night first, which some people will probably scratch their head, because with that, it mostly adapts the Fate route. But what happens is about halfway through, they take elements from Unlimited Blade Works and Heavensfield as well, because I think they probably didn't know if they were going to get all 3 routes adapted, so they said, all right, let's just do this one. I still think it's really good, and it lays the groundwork for what happens next. Then after that, I would actually say to watch Fate Zero, which I know I said earlier, don't start with Fate Zero because it's a prequel, but the way they did it with Ufotable is they adapted Unlimited Blade Works and Heavensfield to connect to their adaptation of Fate Zero with the elements there and the characters who appear and reappear later on. So I'd suggest Fate Zero, which is the 4th Holy Grail War, taking place 10 years prior to Fate Stay Night, following Kiritsugu Emiya and that Holy Grail War. And then Unlimited Blade Works, which we mentioned that before, that's the 2nd route adaptation. Not to be confused with the Studio Dean movie. Studio Dean actually made their own movie version, which I think is so bad it's good because of how quickly they go through it. I strongly recommend the Ufotable. I think it's 24 or 25 episode anime adaptation. And then finally, the 3 Heavensfield movies, which, as far as like the differences, there's so much more little details in the visual novel that the movies kind of leave out. The movies enhance things with the battles and stuff like that, and I do appreciate the English dub in the movies. They're fantastic, especially Crispin Freeman as Kirei Kotomine. Absolute kino. But there's just some little things that I think the visual novel does better, and I almost like the slow pace and the way they handle the fights in the visual novel as opposed to how fast it is in the movies and stuff. But I think the anime is great too. They're still good. But yeah, it's just a fantastic experience. I strongly recommend it. The fact that the game is only $30, it's a steal. Even if you just read a chapter a night, it'll take a long time. But do it, man. It's such a great story. Some days I was like reading it for 10 hours a day. It was so good. I couldn't stop. And, you know, even knowing what I knew from the anime, seeing it in the visual novel, and then hearing the different music, which there's some of the OST from the game, from the visual novel in the anime, but there's some other songs that don't translate over, and it's like, how did they not include that song, or how did they not include that scene? It's like, oh my god, it's so good. It's so good. So I think I will do a spoiler discussion video of this as well. But again, mainly my point was to say I read the visual novel. It's absolute kino. I strongly recommend it, and I want you, the viewer, to read it yourself. Please read it. If not, watch the anime. Watch all the adaptations. Again, to reiterate, 2006 Studio Dean, Fate Zero, Unlimited Blade Works UFO Table, and the Heaven's Feel movies. That's the watch order in anime, in my opinion. But otherwise, read the fucking visual novel! That's about all, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and we will talk to you later. Peace out.
99.